Hello, and welcome to the Revenue Room podcast, where we talk about everything data, digital, AI, and revenue. Before I kick off with our amazing guest, I'm excited to announce a new solution from H2K Labs, RevvedUP. RevvedUP is an invitation-only gathering and a brain trust for CEOs and their revenue-critical C-suite teams leading multi-sided businesses such as media, events, data, and insights, marketplaces, and professional networks. According to Gartner, 86% of CEOs believe AI will maintain or grow company revenues and enterprise value over the next 3 years, yet they do not know where to strategically focus their efforts. I hear this all the time when we talk to clients. That's where we come in. At RevvedUP, we'll dive into how to fuel enterprise value, as well as to create sustainable competitive barriers to entry. RevvedUP, again, invitation only for CEOs and C-suite leaders, takes place February 25th through the 27th in Sarasota, Florida. Please visit h2klabs.com/revvedup to learn more, and that's 2 V's. All right, with that, I'd like to welcome Chris Dyer. Chris is a recognized company culture and remote work expert. As a former CEO managing thousands of people, his companies consistently were named a best place to work. They've also been named a fastest growing company by Inc. magazine 5 times. Chris routinely consults and speaks, and Inc. magazine ranked him as the #1 leadership speaker on culture. He has 3 best-selling books, including The Power of Company Culture and Remote Work, and has been named #5 on the Leaders Hum Power List, alongside Simon Sinek, Gary Vaynerchuk, and Kathy Caprino. Chris is also a top 50 voice in leadership, top 40 change management guru, top 50 global thought leader, top 50 leadership podcast, a top 50 HR leader shaping the future of work. And just this year, Chris made the top 101 global employee engagement and experience influencers by Inspiring Workplaces and WorkBuzz. As a keynote speaker, his goal is to inspire audiences with straightforward delivery, insightful candor, and engaging humor. Just what we need at RevvedUP, by the way. His talks leave audiences permanently transformed, offering innovative perspectives on leadership to improve company culture and empower organizations to discover new successes. Countless companies have unlocked productivity, performance, and profits by implementing his 7-pillar strategy, which we'll dive into during our podcast. So welcome, Chris. I'm so glad to have you here this week, and I'm even more excited to have you as one of our keynotes at RevvedUP.
Heather, thank you. Yeah, so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So I gave a really, I don't know if we could add any more top 100 or top 50.
Please don't add anymore. Please don't.
What an illustrious career. So maybe what would be helpful for the audience is you give more of your own version of your career path and maybe some personal aspects so we get to know you a little better.
Sure. So I'm just like wildly curious about what's the best way to run a company when it comes to the human side of it. I realized at some point that like hiring really good people to run the actual business is the best thing that I can do and get out of their way and let them go run it, with me pointing the way and setting the goals. But the more I help them, with my virtual machete of getting the crap out of their way and letting them go and do their best work, the better we always were. It wasn't about me coming up with the ideas or me having to be the one to think of everything or do everything or approve every decision. As soon as I got out of that frame of mind, and instead it was like, how do I help the people I have today do their best and be their best? And ultimately that sort of turned into this battle cry, right? How do we help people be fully engaged? And so whether it's fully engaged at work or fully engaged in your marriage or fully engaged in your friendships or whatever that is, like how do you show up all the way and in a way that's healthy, in a way that's effective and sustainable, right? When I say fully engaged, I don't mean that people showing up and they're, working 23 hours a day and heading towards burnout. I mean, like, what's the level that they can do where they feel happy and healthy and the business is great. So like, that's where I get curious. There's always new things to learn. I did it selfishly because I wanted my companies to be amazing. And then people just started asking me like, hey, can you come tell us what you're doing? Can you come and talk? Can you write a book? And I did a podcast for years, and I've just been super lucky that I keep falling into the next thing. And I've had the incredible opportunity to be able to share these things with different audiences and businesses to, help them grow, help them reach whatever that goal is that they're trying to reach in the right way.
No, I really love that. it's like you took what you did in your, what I call your operational career, right, as the CEO, and something you were super passionate about and you did very, very well. And then you've been able to move that into this new career. It's not new anymore, but it's a whole different um, career path, in that you're now out helping people take what you did well to help them do well. And it is, leadership is so hard, and being a CEO is so hard. It's to do exactly what you said, and that is, how do I not um, get in the weeds all the time and over, manage, but empower my people to do everything better than me.
Yeah.
That's easier said than done. So
Yeah.
you've written a couple books, and again, about company culture. So can you talk about those books? I think there's three, correct?
Yeah. So two of the books are one book that I re-released last year, and I really ended up doubling it. So, anyone who's ever written a book, or if you ever do write a book, the first one you write will never be as good as you want it to be. You'll always struggle. And the first book for me was hard.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get those ideas out, trying to cover everything I wanted to cover. And I was happy with it when it was done. And about a year later, I wasn't that happy with it. I could have done this and I could have done that. And then there was new discoveries and new research and things. And so I was so excited when the publisher came back to me and said, hey, maybe we could do a second edition. And so I was able to kind of update it, put all the new stuff in there, add case studies with NASA, with Gary Vaynerchuk's company, with Neiman Marcus. So we added some really cool stories and case studies from great organizations to help drive that point. So it wasn't just my story. It's not just what I did at my company. It's like, what are other companies doing as well, to really demonstrate. The pillars that I have are really about what you should be doing, what you should be focusing on. But it's not so granular where I'm telling you have to do it this exact way. That's up to every company, every person, like how they want to interpret that. Let's say if it's transparency or if it's positivity or whatever it is, like how do they interpret that for them so it feels good for them. But we know there's these big overarching concepts that organizations can do. So that was that book. And then I told you I just feel like I get lucky, and as I've kind of moved through this. I took my company fully remote in 2008, and that was really in response to the big recession we had when all the mortgage companies went out of business. And I lost 40% of my clients. I lost 40% of my receivables because of that. And we were thinking, like, are we going to make it? Are we going to survive? And one of the things we decided to do was to send everybody home so we could save all that money on rent and everything else, thinking in a year or two we would come back.
Mm.
And 2 weeks in, every employee, every leader, I mean, I had heard from everybody, and they all said the exact same thing. I love it. Please don't ever make us go back to the office. How do we keep this forever? And so we embarked on this, like, well, we got to figure out how to do this remote work thing for real. Like, what's different? How do we do it differently? And I know a lot of CEOs struggle with remote work. Because your playbook, everything is like doing it there in person. And
Mm-hmm.
when you change the playbook, it's hard to know, like, what are the differences. So I wrote a book called Remote Work, and lucky for me, unlucky for the rest of the world, we had a pandemic happen right as the book came out. So it was perfect timing for people needed it. And I did like 200 trainings for organizations during COVID. I just literally sat in this chair and yacked for 12 hours a day and tried to help as many organizations as I could, like Johnson and Johnson and IKEA and the Ministry of Defense in the UK. Just everybody and their mother was like, how do we do remote work? And I just felt very blessed that I was there at the right time to be able to share what we knew.
That's like luck meets opportunity. Holy
Yeah.
crap. I was going to ask you about like this timeline, and it just all converged together. One of the things, a lot of the CEOs now are saying, come back to the office. If you don't come back, and even like Google did this, like, you don't come
Mhm.
back, or you're not there at least 3 days, you don't have a job anymore, right? Like, and part of me understands that, because I've noticed things with working remote, and I worked remote starting in 2012 when I moved from New York down to Florida. The business was in New York. Some things changed in my life. I moved to Florida and I would go fly up, etc. But I was the leader of the business, right? And so, which was different than letting my team do it. There are three things I find challenging with remote work, and I'd love for you to dive into how you've addressed those. One is the new entrants, right? New entrants to the business. You learn so much when you're first starting out on the job from others, like literally sitting next to people and seeing how they behave in a meeting, or you're in sales and you're hearing the top salespeople on the phone and how they're talking to clients. There's like, they call it the water cooler, type of training. It's just constantly happening when you're young. And I actually can see young people now don't actually know how to work if they're starting out remote. So that's like the one challenge. The second one is, especially if you're in a startup type company, is the innovation that happens when you're like, all right, guys, let's just get to the whiteboard and start like mind mapping this on the fly. And then there's the loneliness factor for people. I mean, I met my husband at work. My friends are from
Mm-hmm.
work. I just was on LinkedIn and saw someone who I started working with in 1993, who I've kept in touch with, and she just got hired by one of our clients. And I was like, "What?" Like, there's that part. So I kind of just dumped a ton on you, but
Yeah, I mean, so we're going to have to go through these one at a time here. These are three really big ones, right? So let's talk first. I think the first one was I guess it was more like, how do you move information around? Was that what
the first one was the new entrants, i.e., graduates from college. You're hiring
Mm.
them. They like that being in the office and learning how to work.
Okay. Right. So, and that's true whether it's, they just got out of college or they're changing industries or someone comes into your company, right? So what we found was that we had to shift how we work very substantially, meaning that we couldn't just allow for things to happen accidentally, that you would just bump in, that you would have these moments in the office, right? Where like, which by the way is wildly inefficient, that we were just allowing people to like by osmosis, like somehow absorb how everybody else was working, right? That actually turned out, when we started doing it intentionally, we realized that that was fairly inefficient as well. If you don't replace it, you're right, then they're going to be left on an island, and that's a problem. So what we started doing was we started moving our coaching and our goal setting and our measurement of how we were doing out of one-on-one meetings and into team meetings. So the team would meet on a regular basis. Some teams met every day. Some teams met multiple times a day. Some teams met once a week. It just that every team was different on what they needed. And we talked about, as a team, what do we need? How are we doing? How is everyone doing on their goals? And we're there supporting each other. So think of it like going from having a therapist to having group therapy. It's a big shift in the kind of work you're doing and what you're trying to do there. If you're in group therapy, everyone's there to try to support you. You're listening to everybody, right? It's not like I'm just with my boss and we're the only two people that know what my goal is, and no one really knows if I'm doing a good job or not. Like, that's a very isolating way to deal with it. And so by moving that in there and us talking about that, then people got that I'm learning from my team. I'm learning what's happening. I'm learning behaviors. I'm learning the norms that you talked about that are going on in the organization. And then we tried to find other ways for them to bump into each other. So out inside the company, so outside of your team, how do you bump into other people where you can learn, be exposed to how they think, maybe pick up on great ideas? And the way we did that was we created this thing called the cockroach meeting. And a cockroach meeting is, so if imagine you have a cockroach in your bathroom. It's a small problem. You may not want to be the one who cleans it up. I get it. But like, it's a small thing. So anybody could call a cockroach meeting and you could invite anybody you want. There are no barriers. I mean, you can invite, you could have invited me, the CEO or the CFO or if you think they're the right person to have on that call, invite whoever you want. 5 to 7 was the max, 15-minute meeting max. And it's, hey, I have a problem. I need help. The trick is you can invite anybody, but it is totally optional to attend. Doesn't matter who calls it. If you get invited, it's totally optional. Can I go and help you? I got 5 minutes. I can hop on this call and help you. Cool. I don't. I got too much. I got a pile of to-dos. I got a meeting at that time. I don't go. That's fine. Right? It was total freedom. So, but that allowed us to get people who wouldn't normally bump into each other to kind of start bumping into each other, because you have people asking for help.
Yeah.
You have people giving help. And then you have people in the middle going, oh, there's a meeting about that. I would love to know the answer to that. I would love to learn about that. And so we're creating these little tiny, and the meetings end up being like 7 or 8 minutes total. But these tiny little moments that would happen 40, 50, 60 times a day, these little cockroach meetings, where people can bump into each other intentionally about a specific topic, get the help they need, and get told, hey, maybe your computer's not working. What you need is Tom in IT to go solve this. Or there's a permission, and they get you from A to B very quickly. Because one other thing we found, and you kind of alluded to this, was like sometimes when we get lonely and we get like stuck on an island, we noticed employees started like Googling for hours or watching YouTube videos for hours trying to solve their problem when there was 50 people who could have helped them. And they just didn't know how to ask for help. And so the cockroach meeting was an institutionalized way to say, I need help. Get me unstuck in 7 to 8 minutes instead of me spending hours trying to figure this out on my own.
And
Right?
potentially getting the wrong diagnosis from Google, which
Right.
adds on another layer of inefficiency.
Right. So, and there's like another 100 things that, is in my book that we did I consistently, coach people on that have these problems. There's lots of different little things we do, but we had to like redo work. You can't do work like you do in an office. Just like if you have multiple locations, you're going to do it differently. There's a different, operating system, all in one little cubicle farm. We're in 2 different locations. We're a global company. They all have their own different sort of way of working. And it's the same thing when you have remote or hybrid employees.
I think we need to get your book for the attendees of RevvedUP before, and I'm actually like, I am buying this and reading it right now. So my head's spinning on that one. Okay, so that cockroach meeting is, I love that. And it actually probably helps with the other point I brought up, which is that innovation on the fly. So you could, like, hey guys, I need to brainstorm about this. I want, here's what I'm trying to do. Let's jump on a call and start
Right.
whiteboarding it out virtually.
So what you mentioned about that in like a startup situation, it was actually the act and that practice of like, hey, we're going to go brainstorm, and hey, we're going to go whiteboard this. And we're doing that because we're a startup and we have no idea what we're doing and we're going a million miles a minute, right? That is a behavior we can replicate. There's no reason why that can't continue in a more established business. So how do you do that? Well, there are whiteboarding tools. I mean, Zoom has a whiteboarding thing now in it, right? You can go to Notion. We can literally take it from somewhere in a conference room and put it into a virtual setting. That's number one. Number two, sometimes it's a good idea to get together. There's nothing wrong with that either. That may cost you a little bit more money, but like I used to get together with my senior team once a month in person, and we would do that stuff together. And my sales team would get together 3-4 times a year, sometimes at conferences, and they would take an extra day and do planning together. Like there are ways in which to think about how to make this happen. It doesn't have to be that we're always there together all the time. We always did it once a year for all employees. I had every employee come together in December. We did our holiday party. We did several days of brainstorming and being together and bumping elbows and hugging and high-fiving and all that. And that goodwill and energy that we created in December lasted us all year round. Like that was enough that we created those relationships.
I love, and actually, I just wrote conscious gatherings. Like, I think I see this as a huge miss. It's like we're remote, so like there's no thought about, yes, we're remote, but that does not mean we don't get together. And there needs
Right.
to be consistency to it because that human element part is so important, not just for the innovation, the brainstorming and planning. It's the relationship building and working together, but it's that other part, which is the social aspect.
Yeah.
It allows you to develop professional friendships, which I think are important in life, as
Yeah.
a human being.
So we wanted our people to continue to be innovative and to continue to think that way, even as the business became more and more established and not in the startup mode anymore.
Right.
And so we created a meeting, and this meeting turned out to be a fantastic way to make sure that our meeting stayed healthy all month long. So this meeting is called a tsunami planning meeting. And once a month, every team would get together and the leader would pick an imaginary topic. Okay. What would happen if the CEO got hit by a bus? What would happen if our business doubled? What would happen if our business got cut in half? What would happen if the government changed the law and like we couldn't do the work that we do? Like just some crazy good or bad thing that could happen to the business. And then the team would go and they would discuss it and brainstorm it for 30 minutes with the leader doing as little of the talking and as little of the guiding and directing as humanly possible, like letting them do it themselves and being the leader being more of an observer in this setting. And what we found was is this: one, people get really creative and really start to flex that innovation muscle because it was about something that was not real. There was no one going to say this is a dumb idea. No one's going to say that's a great idea. Now you're in charge. Now you have more work. Now you have to go do more things. This was all just imaginary. And they ended up coming up with really cool ideas that sometimes we ended up using later on in real life, things that really happened. Or we would say, this was like a really cool idea. If we did double our business, we should write all this stuff down and we put it in a little folder. And like when we had a big RFP hit and we were really going to double our business kind of thing, we pulled that folder out. We already had like kind of a game plan of what some things to think about. What we also found was that this was also when people who were bad in meetings, I don't want to say bad, but like needed some help, the over talkers, the under talkers, the people who just are talk loud, or maybe they're ineffective in getting their point across. They really need coaching and they need that help to like articulate what they wanted to say. This is when the leader was watching their team going, need to have a meeting with Sally because Sally needs to start speaking up. I know she has a great idea right now and she's not getting herself heard, right? Tom, that guy needs to shut up. He has just been talking for the whole time and he needs some coaching on, we need to let other people talk. We need to let people finish their sentences. Like we need to not, I know you get excited, but like, and so when we go back, that leader did all that coaching with them. We had an entire month of fantastic meetings with the team. They were happy and excited to come to meetings because we had good meetings that were curated and people listened to each other and they were good, teammates to each other. So that's a great way to kickstart innovation, right? But also make sure that we're not creating an environment. Again, I talked about my virtual machete. That was another virtual machete moment. People, we realized that they either loved or they hated being in meetings. And usually they hated being in meetings because their manager wasn't very good and their team was out of control. And it was just like, they didn't want to be there. And they liked their job, but like they didn't like being in those meetings because they always went long. They never started on time. They had 2 or 3 teammates that wouldn't shut up and they could never get hurt. Like those things will drive you nuts and you'll end up leaving for another job. So
that's really well. Again, you've given all right. So cockroach meetings, tsunami planning meeting, and now we got a virtual machete. I think that last point is really critical because if you don't manage that part, like when you're in person in a meeting and someone's interrupting a lot, or again, the leader can be like, "Hey, stop." There's a lot of body language. It's more difficult in these virtual meetings. So training leaders on how to have that virtual machete so that their meetings are productive, they're helpful, they're empowering, and you're also navigating different personality traits So as you say, like Lisa's not getting completely overridden, by Jane, who talks all the time.
Right.
That's like training. You have to, those are new skills.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about having, younger people or new people to your company or to the workforce in general, not necessarily knowing some of this stuff. And this is how we do it. This is how we
Mhm.
help them. This is how we provide them this intentional training, this being more intentional about it instead of them just, I would do all of this stuff today, even if I had a company where we were all in the same office and we were all working together. I would not leave it to chance like I used to do. I would
No,
just,
I think
right.
some of the stuff you're talking about is ubiquitous to whether it's remote or in office
Mhm.
or hybrid. Because I'll be honest, when I ran my company, our salespeople were all remote because we had them at that time, again a long time ago. You had regional territory coverage, and you wanted them
Mhm.
in those territories, and it was always, looking back, if I had known some of these things, we would have been more successful with that remote team, because part of the team was in the office and we were all together all the time, and they were outliers, right? And we didn't bring them in like we should have. So in any case, I think these are really great. These are great
Your
strategies for
And then
both.
your third question was about loneliness, and I wanted to just very quickly tell you what I always told all my employees once we were remote. And that is the great part about remote work is that you have this deeper time to think and to do your work, and you're not doing all of the relationship stuff at work. That also means that work might not be a place where you find friends and have that social outlet anymore. Remote work might be that place where you just get your work done, right? And so what's really, really important is that they need to think about where they can replace that they're going to have to find their friendships and their relationships somewhere else in their life. It may not be at work anymore. If Because we used to hire like a lot of people that did data entry all day long, and they sat in their office, and they had some team meetings and they had some stuff where they got to talk to people, but like 99% of their job they sat in silence or whatever they want to listen to and did their data entry stuff, and then they were done.
Hmm.
And they were never going to have a work best friend. And so we just needed them to realize that, and then to go replace it somewhere else in their life, and then they were totally fine and happy. But if you rely on work to be a place where you're going to have your friends and going to go want to, you're used to going and having a beer with them after work or whatever, and that's your social outlet, you're going to be really lonely in remote work.
Part of me wonders if it's generational too, because I'm a Gen Xer, right? So, and I was joking with somebody the other day, me and my friends and I, we were it was a badge of honor if we worked until 8 or 9 or 10.
Right.
Like, who worked the latest was the coolest. Like, that's not
Right.
the same with this new generation. But what that meant was our life was work and then go home, work, go home, and have a little fun after work for drinks with the people you stayed there till 8 or 9 with. I do think there's a generational shift that is no longer a desirable outcome. So maybe that's part of it, And I also didn't grow up with technology like the new entrants have, for sure. Um,
Yeah.
let's move to something which is, you mentioned it earlier, which is the 7 pillars, your 7 pillars of success, and you've written about them. What are those pillars, and can you describe them to us?
Sure. So I can kind of very quickly give you like a little highlight, and then if you want to dive into any of those, let me know. So there's transparency. How do we tell people everything we can possibly tell them about the business and what's going on, and being upfront and honest? We used to give our P&L to everyone in the company every month. We just full transparency. And the benefit of that is that when they know what you know, then they can come back with great ideas and they can make better decisions. Usually we get stuck as the boss or CEOs or entrepreneurs having to make all the decisions and come up with all the ideas because we're the ones that know all the information. And then we're frustrated and pissed off because no one has any good ideas in this company. Well, because they don't know what you know, and they don't know what how much money we have, and where our best clients are, and like what's happening. They don't know any of this stuff. So that's transparency. Second one is positive leadership or positivity. So focusing on what's working first, creating environments that are positive for people to be in and exist. We know that innovation always comes out at much higher levels when people are in positive environments where we believe good things are going to happen and we're focusing on the wins and we're high-fiving each other. And we talked about jumping up in a startup on the whiteboard. Like those are moments of positivity. You didn't say, let's go to the whiteboard and write down all the things everyone did wrong today, right? We're talking about the pot. So positivity is really, really important. We still deal with the stuff that's a problem. We still deal with issues, but we start with what's working. Mm-hmm. The next one is listening. So great companies know how to listen, make their people feel heard, whether that's surveys, that's how we listen to them in meetings. It's how we listen to our clients, we listen to our vendors. I mean, like it's not just employees. It's like your entire culture has to be good at listening and making the other party feel heard every single time. Uniqueness. So focusing on what makes us unique, not what makes us the same. And this is sort of the lens of DE&I. This is where we start looking for diversity of thought and trying to hire people that are different and come from different places and different upbringings and think differently. Again, that's back to innovation. If we keep hiring the same person who looks the same, acts the same, from the same school, who went to the same fraternity or sorority you went to, you're going to get the same ideas and the same stuff over and over. Sometimes you want that predictability in the job they're going to do, but I think if you want different thinkers, you got to hire different people. And we see that from the best organizations, that they consistently focus on the uniqueness of the person, the uniqueness of their product or service, their unique value proposition, and they articulate that and focus on that over. So it's not just a people thing. This is a marketing thing. This is a values thing that we bring to our organizations. Recognition. We have you need to have an intentional program about how you're going to recognize people. In my book, I advocate for just saying thank you and having a way in which we do that and a place we do that. I also give a counterpoint to that of how Caesars Entertainment, I worked with them on their recognition program, and they do something totally different that costs them millions of dollars a year, but it's a really cool what they do. But like that's Caesars, and they have tens of thousands of employees, and that's not most companies. So I gave you kind of two ideas in the book on how to handle that. But if you're giving out Starbucks gift cards to get people to tell them thank you, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Not long term, at least. Mistakes. So how do we deal with mistakes is pillar number 6. And there's mistakes and errors. Errors are not good. We do not want to tolerate errors. We want to eliminate errors. But mistakes are, hey, I had all the information that was possible, and I made a decision, and it turned out not to be the right one. Or I was trying to do something good. I was trying something new. I thought maybe if we did it differently, we could get a better outcome for the client. That didn't work. And we want to celebrate that. We want to talk about that. We want to high five those people when they do that. And in fact, I think those are moments when you do give them a gift card or a bonus or something, because we want to encourage people to show up and say, I tried and it didn't work. And let's figure out how we can make it work the next time. And let's share that information around the company. And the last one is measurement. Great organizations, I mean, Google is the master of this, is you got to measure what matters, and you got to measure and you got to look at it, and you got to make sure that we're getting better and that we're making the shifts and the changes, and that we're not just hoping we'll be profitable or hoping that works or hoping that we'll find good clients that are profitable for us. Like, we have to measure that stuff. Again, measure what matters, not measure everything, because that's exhausting, and it doesn't matter. Right? Measure what's important to your business, and make sure that you tell everyone, transparency, right? And that we celebrate the good stuff first, positivity. And if it's not going right, we figure out how to fix it, mistakes. So all of the stuff kind of ties in. Those are the 7 things the best organizations in their own way do consistently. And that's why they're market leaders.
Oh, those are great. And I'm actually, to myself, taking notes like, okay, I have to be more positive. No, seriously, because it's hard sometimes, like, as you said, like the balance of if things aren't going right and they don't have transparency into why or what the situation is, but yet I'm, coming down on them like, we need to
Hmm.
do this, we need to do that. So they don't have the transparency. You're not leading with positivity first.
Right.
And then the other part of that is, the recognition, which, and I connect that with the mistakes, right? Because um, recognizing what's being done well, but also recognizing people for taking a risk and maybe it didn't pan out. You learned
Hmm.
something from it, and then being transparent with that and the learnings so that you can spread the knowledge, democratize those learnings.
Right.
But there, and the measurement clearly, I was just talking with somebody, a client the other day, a CFO, and he asked me, well, how do I, we're spending money on training, but how do I measure if it's working?
Hmm.
And we started talking about it. And I said, well, it really depends on what you want to measure. What are you trying to fix? Or what are you trying to improve? Where are you? And clearly, as the CFO, you're seeing lack of performance through numbers, right? Like whether it's, let's call it,
Yeah.
your sales cycle time, right? We're taking 90 days to close deals and it really needs to take 45. It's too expensive for us. Great. You measure that, then measure from the beginning, before, measure what in the middle, measure after, and then make that data transparent to the rest of the organization so that you can socialize it and that other teams can start using this to improve. But the measurement's key. And actually, one of my questions I had written down is, from a more of a CEO perspective, if they, like, let's say they say, we're going to start following these 7 pillars, and they start implementing it. How do they measure? Like, what would they measure here? Like, how do they measure the success? Like, what have you recommended to other clients?
Sure. So we measured a lot of things. We wanted to know what was our engagement like. Are our employees getting happier? Are they, more productive? So we would look at like their productivity. We would look at what they were telling us about how they were feeling about their job. We were looking at them telling us how they felt about their boss. Was that improving? Right. We would look at that generally. We would look at that specifically. Like, is that boss, is it things getting better, especially maybe where that leader wasn't getting great scores when we started? Like, are things getting better? Then we would look at things like customer satisfaction, right? So what was our NPS score, and we had a goal to get our NPS score up much higher. Us having a great culture ties. It's not just how well we treat that client. We have to treat our employees well, who can then go treat our clients well, who have the authority and the ability and can go out there and try things and do things and ultimately make our clients happy. And again, if we're being transparent with our employees, they'll start being transparent with the clients, right? And when we start doing positivity really well, that starts helping the clients. I'll give you a quick story on positivity with clients. I sometimes would get called in as the CEO to, like, this client is next level pissed, and they've already been through 2 layers of managers or whatever, and they're still yelling and screaming, and they are not happy, and they cannot be calmed down, and they bring me in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I always say to anybody in that situation is just so I understand, so we don't waste any of your time talking about it, can you tell me what we're doing right? Can you tell me what's good about our relationship, just so I can put that? And what I'm doing is getting them to admit, okay, well, you guys always do this right. This is always great. This is the, and you can see their level of anger come down and their frustration come down. And suddenly we're having a real conversation about something that they're concerned about, or maybe something we screwed up. And we can actually talk about how to fix it or what we're going to do about it for the client. And they always end up leaving that conversation with me thanking me, when before they were like, I'm leaving, we're throwing the business out the door, we're never paying our bill. I mean, they were just, so pissed off. But when we help people remember what's
Yeah.
good in the relationship, about why we're here to begin with, right? That's what's the positive thing amongst the negative. And it's the same thing if you've got an employee who's not performing, if you've got a client you don't like, you've got, I don't know, your numbers aren't what you want them to be, or whatever that thing is. Like, but what's the thing that's actually working, and how do we do more of that? How do we get curious about that, right? It's the same thing with salespeople. I can't tell you how many times I've gone in and worked with an organization that says, we need our sales to go up. We want to change the culture. I'm like, okay, great. So tell me what you're doing. Well, we've got these 5 salespeople and they rock. They're great. And I got these 10 and they're okay. They're kind of making their number. They're fine. And I got 5 over here and they're terrible. And they're not making their number. We don't know what to do about it. I'm like, okay, cool. So what have you been doing to make sales better? Well, those 5 people are on a PIP and we're on every single one of their emails and we're doing extra training and I'm on every one of their calls. I review all their proposals. So all this energy, all of this effort are on the 5 people who are terrible, they said, who are not bringing in any money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I go, cool, but what are the 5 people doing that are really good? And they're like, I don't know. They're like magic. They just, I leave them alone. They always meet their quota. They do great. Everyone loves them. I'm like, yeah, but why? They don't know. Or they're just special. They're just this unique, unicorn of a No, that's not it. Why don't we go get really curious about what they're doing, about their habits, about why they're, and you mentioned this earlier about like learning from a good salesperson, like hearing them talk on the phone, like you might pick something up. How do we go figure out what they're doing and then have them teach everybody else? Right?
I talk about this all the time because, we really are centered on revenue, and the A players are A player, okay, great. You could be born an A player. I'm sorry, that's actually not how it works, especially in today's day and age.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a ton of data around what those A players are doing if you are capturing it correctly. How do you take that, right? And then translate that, one, to ramp your B players up to A players, saying, hey, we notice our A players are doing these 5 things for every deal. This many calls, this many outreaches. We're using Gong to record, and we know they're using this kind of language. We could use those recordings to help train. Like, there are things they are doing. And a lot of it, by the way, with great salespeople is consistency,
Mm-hmm.
consistency, and things like listening better and rapid response to clients, being super customer centric. And then how do you take that to the B and then also to the C? And, for a company from a cost perspective, the amount of money you could save by ramping up the bad ones to good is actually like extraordinary in terms of numbers. But the other part is, if you're actually using the data, maybe those people that are at the bottom aren't bad salespeople. Maybe they're selling the wrong thing. Maybe they have a bad sales leader. Maybe they're in the
Mm-hmm.
wrong territory. So, like,
Right.
I agree with that 100%.
And I want to be fair, like there are going to be people who aren't ever going to be able to be leveled up, and you're going to have to get rid of them. We've all had bad salespeople and I didn't say bad, but just like misaligned, right? They just aren't going to be good at that job that you try to hire them for, and that's okay. And we need to figure that out quickly.
Right.
But it is really, really key that you as the leader can help those top salespeople or those top customer service people or whatever the job title is, help them figure out what it is that they're doing or not doing. No, that's a big thing, not doing, to be successful. Because sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they have a hard time like articulating it themselves because they just it's sort of like they operate in such a way and they're not haven't really thought about it intentionally, like to go back and teach somebody. But then they need to be the ones. I'll say this again. They need to be the ones to teach the other people. It can't be you, the leader, learning what they do, and then you, the leader, turning around and trying to tell them because they don't believe it. They think that you're just trying to tell them what to do. When they hear it from their peer and their peer tells them and their peer teaches them, they will believe it and they will try it and they will get better if that is in their ability to get better at that job. Right?
That's really important.
Yeah, it is. We learned this the hard way. We were like observing, and when we were like, why isn't anybody getting better? And then finally we got them together. And honestly, what I found my best salespeople did were typically they didn't spend all their time in the CRM like we were telling them they were supposed to. I found out one of my salespeople had like hired his own virtual assistant and had that person in his CRM doing all the notes and updating all the stupid stuff that we were asking him to do. And so that was like light bulb moment. Let's get them some, instead of hiring another big expensive salesperson, let's get them some entry level people who can come in and do all that stuff and the thing so they could spend more time selling. Right.
That's great. That's really great, actually, because and now with virtual assistants, that really could solve a huge, huge, huge problem.
Right.
Massive.
Right. CRO wants all that stuff updated in the CRM, but like, do you really want your top salespeople spending 30-40% of their time doing data entry? I don't.
No, absolutely. But you do need data.
Right. We do need data, but I don't necessarily need them. I mean, they can figure out how to do that stuff. You know what I mean? And there's great note takers now, and you can take those note takers and have somebody else go in and fill that stuff in and move that client along in the opportunity cycle or whatever, just whatever that stuff is, so we can look at the big data. But we found that like they weren't doing all that stuff. They weren't, following up on particular leads. Like we get in this mindset of like every lead is good. You must follow up on every lead. They were pretty good at going, this lead is not going anywhere. I'll make my obligatory call, send the email, but like I'm not doing 50 follow-ups. But there's another kind of lead comes in, like, yeah, this fits a profile, and I will run this person down until I get them in, right?
That's also another way you could use the virtual assistant, and especially now with these AI sales bots, is that for that pile over here that you kind of have to deal with, but is it really worth my time? You can push that over there, and if something converts, great. Have them focus on the super high level value ones, and it's a great optimization. You've come up. I mean, by the way, like in this podcast, I think there are so many absolute actual takeaways that it's the meeting types, the way that your 7 pillars, the cockroach meeting I love, which I might do here, and then the anvil, or no, the what did you call it, the machete,
virtual machete. Yeah,
virtual machete. So we're running out of time, but I did want to ask one final question before we close out, and that is, we have this advisory board, and one of my board members we were talking, and I had asked, what as a CEO you've been a CEO for the last 30 years. It can't be that CEOs don't have to level up their skills. You always do. What is your challenge? And he actually told me, he said, it's managing this remote work environment. And I know you gave a ton of ideas, but from a CEO perspective, like if you had to say the number one or the top 2 things you really need to focus on in terms of how you lead, what would they be?
As it relates to remote work, you think? Is that
They're 100% remote now. They went from fully office-based. Mm-hmm. COVID changed the game. They thought they were going to come back. They made a decision not to. And now, so they went full hog the other way, like, we're shutting down all of our offices, kind of like what you did with your company.
Yeah. So I'll maybe get some practical thing here. The first thing that I realized was not working for us was one-on-one meetings. And so we actually eliminated one-on-ones. So let me clarify. Like if you're going to train somebody, if you're going to meet about something important or serious, or maybe you're working on a project with somebody in one-on-one, that's fine. I'm talking about that stupid, on Tuesday at 9 a.m., we always meet. I'm your boss, you're my direct report, and we're going to meet every Tuesday at 9. Except we don't, because I cancel it half the time because I'm traveling, or I've got some other client meeting or whatever. And we're supposed to be having a career conversation. But like basically it's just us bitching and moaning about business. And then like you end up gossiping or tattling about some team member you didn't like. It's the most unproductive conversation of all time, especially virtually. Move that to the team. Make the team, all of you, in charge of coaching each other. All of you there to help each other. All of you there knowing what each other's goals are. right? So if I'm at 80% of my goal and it's July, I mean, I can do a lot more helping with everybody else on the team to help them get, because ultimately, don't we want the team to be successful so the company can be successful, right? And I don't mean like doing the work for somebody else because they can't do it. I just mean like, there are ways for us to be helping in a healthy way and to be coaching. And that's also another way to like create more leaders, create better decision making, create that opportunity to show them that we value and we listen, that we're hearing them. Again, that's by putting it into that group. So stop having these little, because when you're in these one-on-one thing, it's like, especially virtually, you literally, there are no signposts. This might be the second thing I would say, is we have to create signposts for our people. When you walk in the door, that's a signpost. At an office, it's time to work. When I leave, the signpost literally says exit. I'm done for the day, right? Even if you did go until 9 o'clock at night, like when you did leave, then you were done and you could turn your brain off of work and on to something else. And so with remote work and even hybrid, we have lost these signposts of like, well, when am I supposed to brainstorm? And when am I supposed to catch up? And when are we supposed to talk about my career? When are we supposed to, I don't know, collaborate or whatever? And it can't be on these same boring 30-minute or 60-minute meetings you keep having that are just completely just stale and are the same meeting over and over and over again for your people. Give them names: cockroach meetings, tsunami planning meetings. We had ostrich meetings and tiger meetings, and like give them names and give them a point so people know what they're supposed to do.
Yeah,
This is true of any generation, but right now we have a current generation coming in that would love a little bit of help and clarity about what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to act, what you expect of them. And we can do that by starting curating our meetings a little bit better by telling them in advance. Here's the agenda. Here's what I expect from you. Hey, Tiger Team meeting, if you're not one of the leaders in this meeting, it's basically a show up and shut up and listen. And if you have a good idea and you can help us, when we want to do that part, that's great. But this is like a big problem. Cockroach meeting, tiny problem. Everyone shows up. This is like free for all. You got a good idea? Let's figure it out. We're off in 8 minutes. No big deal, right? We change that focus. So we create these signposts by being intentional about those meeting names, meeting types, eliminating the one-on-one meetings as much as possible, having more small team meetings so that we can move information around quickly, because we don't have the hallways, we don't have the cubicles, we don't have the, hey, let's go out to lunch and get caught up on what's happening. We have to re-engineer that into those meetings. So really put a heavy focus on meetings, how you meet, and meeting with more than one person, if at all possible, so that you can move information around at a much better level.
That is, I think, actually a huge game changer. I'm guilty of this as well. You have meetings scheduled. We call them stand-ups, our huddles, but then they all go off in different directions, and then everyone's like, "Well, I thought we were coming here to do this, but Heather just took the conversation all the way down this rabbit hole." Yeah, so I think that is a gold mine. So with that, one is, you're going to be at RevvedUP February 25th through the 27th. Your keynote's on the 26th, and so people will have an opportunity to meet you there. But if they're not coming to RevvedUP, how do they get in touch with you?
A few ways. So you can text 33777 and put my name, Chris, as the message, and you'll immediately be on my mailing list. I'll send you some free giveaway, like all about those meeting types, how to help your employees feel heard by doing surveys in a different way. So I'll send you that free PDF immediately. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect. I'm on TikTok, Instagram. I do a ton of content there. So if you'd like to join the conversation there, that'd be great. I'm on all the social platforms, but YouTube and all that stuff. So wherever you want to find me, I'm there. I'm happy to connect. Or last but not least, you can go to my website, chrisdyer.com. But hopefully they're going to be at your event in February. I'd be excited to meet them there. And I'm going to be excited to know if that you still want the same keynote topic, because we talked about culture and remote work. And I think we're supposed to talk about AI and the future of work at the conference. So let me know what you want to do, but I'm excited to be there.
Don't worry. You and I have got some great ideas for what we're going to do. So we just touched the surface. So, all right, with that, thank you for joining us. This was phenomenal. Again, if you're a CEO or C-suite leader, and actually I do want to say one thing. So Chris, my business are all about events. That is our market. So it's media companies who do events, it's event organizers. So if you're watching this or listening to this podcast, Chris is a phenomenal keynote speaker, spoken for Fortune 500 companies, world recognized around the world. So definitely look at Chris as a potential keynote for your event. So February 25th through 27th, RevvedUP, and thank you.
Thank you.